Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You've handed us an incredible set of documents today, a deep, detailed look at the financial results for, well, one of the world's biggest sporting institutions, Manchester United.
That's right. We're getting into their fiscal Q1 2026 results. So that's for the quarter ending September 30th, 2025.
And what makes these so interesting, I think, is that they really capture the first proper impact of the new ownership structure.
Exactly. Specifically, the operational control that's now with Sir Ratcliffe and INEOS, with the new chief executive, Omar Berrada, right at the front of it.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We need to unpack this very complex balance sheet, and not just the raw numbers, but the strategy behind them.
Yeah, the new management's decisions and, crucially, how the fans are reacting to it all because, they're an incredibly vocal bunch.
We're looking for those little nuggets of insight that cut through all the noise.
And there's a lot of noise because these results, well, they paint a really confusing picture. The headlines tell two completely different stories. It's sort of the core conflict of modern football finance, really.
That's the central paradox we have to tackle straight away, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got the club talking about resilience and celebrating this massive swing to profit.
A huge swing.
But on the other, they've also revealed that their total debt has ballooned to a record high.
Precisely. How can a business be healthier than it's been in years and at the same time be shouldering a historic amount of debt? I mean, look at the numbers.
Yeah.
You've got this phenomenal turnaround. Operating profit soared to £13 million, which, when you compare it to a devastating £7 million loss this time last year.
That's a £20 million swing. It's incredible.
And yet the total debt figure has hit an eye-watering £1.29 billion. It's a textbook example of, operational success being completely undermined by old, unproductive legacy debt.
Okay, let's unpack this. This deep dive is going to mean going way beyond the headlines and really getting into the technical details of both that success and that debt.
Let's do it.
So let's start with the immediate revenue picture. The club reported total revenues of £140.3 million for the quarter.
Right.
Now, that sounds massive, but the sources we have point out it's actually a slight drop from last year, down from about 143 million. Why the little stumble there?
Well, the club gave two main reasons for it, and it's important to say that neither of them really suggests a long-term problem with their commercial power.
Okay, so what's the first one?
The first and the biggest one is the lack of UEFA broadcast revenues in this quarter.
That makes sense straight away.
Well,
last year, the men's team was in the Europa League in Q1. This year, they were out of Europe completely for that quarter.
exactly.
But can losing just the Europa League really cause a multi-million-pound hit like that?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about timing. When a club is in Europe, that broadcast money starts flowing in straight away, in the early quarters, even before the knockouts.
So it's guaranteed income.
It's guaranteed cash flow, and it's crucial for Q1 and Q2 liquidity. The difference between the Europa League and the Champions League is already stark, but the difference between Europa League and, well, nothing, that's an immediate, predictable hole in the accounts. The money just isn't there.
Right. So if they'd been in the Champions League this year, we'd be seeing a massive jump in this Q1 revenue figure.
Exponentially so, yeah. The Champions League money is just structured differently. You get much higher initial fees for participation, for the market pool, all of it. Missing Europe is a big hit. Missing the Champions League consistently, which we'll come to, is almost an existential threat to their growth targets.
Okay, and what was the second reason they gave for the dip?
It was purely a calendar thing. The club just played 2 fewer home games in this quarter compared to the same time last year.
Okay. So that affects match day revenue.
It does. It dropped a little from 26.5 million to about 26.2. It's not a huge amount, but it adds to that overall softening of the revenue.
And I saw sponsorship revenue dipped as well.
Yeah, that was down by about 4.8 million or 9% or so, and that was mainly down to the training kit deal with Tezos just naturally expiring.
So that's just a timing issue, too. That sponsorship money will probably be replaced or even be higher in the future once a new partner is signed up.
Precisely. The club said talks are ongoing, which suggests this dip is just temporary. The main takeaway for you here is that the small drop in revenue is down to things management couldn't really control in the short term, not a loss of commercial appeal. Manchester United is still a commercial behemoth.
Which makes that profit swing even more stunning then. If the top line was a bit down, how on earth did they manage to go from a £7 million operating loss to a £13 million operating profit? That 20 million quid turnaround is a huge statement.
It's the absolute definition of efficiency. And it proves that the new management under Ratcliffe and Berrada is actually fixing the internal bleeding. I mean, this 13 million profit is the best Q1 result the club has had in 6 years.
6 years. Wow.
It's not just a tiny improvement. It shows a fundamental change in how the club manages its costs.
Let's look at how management is framing this. The quotes from the chief executive, Omar Berrada, are pretty telling. He says the results reflect the resilience of Manchester United as we make strong progress in our transformation of the club.
And he goes on, doesn't he? He directly says it's down to the difficult decisions that they made, which created a sustainably lower cost base and a more streamlined, effective organization.
Right.
And that's not just PR fluff. The numbers actually back him up. They've tackled the bloat. The old structure was just too inefficient to turn a profit unless the team was, consistently winning the Champions League.
Okay, let's challenge that a bit. Difficult decisions is classic corporate jargon for, well, firing hundreds of people and cutting staff perks. Are we really buying that this is all about long-term stability? Or is some of it just for quick optics? A rapid cleanup job to impress everyone?
I think it's probably both, to be fair. But financially, the optics are the reality. They needed to show the market and the fans, who were so critical of the old regime's wastefulness, that they could run the non-football side of things like a lean, modern business.
And this profit result is their proof.
It's their proof of concept, exactly. It confirms that the underlying commercial engine of the club is powerful enough to generate cash, but only if that cash isn't immediately wasted on unnecessary overheads.
And you see this confidence reflected in their forward guidance, which is crucial for understanding their long-term view. They're sticking by their really ambitious full-year revenue guidance of 640 to 660 million pounds.
And critically, their adjusted EBITDA guidance is set between 180 and 200 million. Now, we should probably explain that a bit.
Yeah.
Good idea. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. But the adjusted part is key here. It's a measure management uses to show the underlying profit before things like non-cash charges and big one-off events are factored in.
So they basically strip out the massive interest payments and the cost of player contracts being written down over time just to show what the business generates from its day-to-day operations.
That's it exactly. When you're looking at a club saddled with so much legacy debt, like United, and spending so much on players, EBITDA is a much clearer way to see the operational performance rather than the final net profit, which is dominated by non-operational costs, like debt interest.
So by setting that guidance so high, they're saying they expect the cost-cutting we saw in Q1 to carry on all year.
They do. And that clarity on profitability links directly to the regulations, doesn't it? The club specifically mentioned they're compliant with both the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules, PSR, and UEFA's Financial Fair Play, FFP.
That's probably the most important part of the forward guidance for the football side of things.
It really is. PSR limits losses to £105 million over a rolling 3-year period. By showing they're operationally efficient and predicting a strong EBITDA, the new management is creating a safety buffer. They're signaling to the league and to UEFA that any future net losses will be driven by the legacy debt and player costs, which are viewed a bit differently under the rules, rather than by reckless spending.
So the message is, we are fixing the ship, which gives us more room to spend on players and the stadium without breaking the rules.
That is precisely the implication.
Okay, we've established the profit came from cutting costs. Let's dig into the specifics, because this is where you can really see the management strategy. Total operating expenses were down by £13.2 million. That's a 7% drop.
Which is substantial for a single quarter. But the real engine of that profit, the bit where the difficult decisions really happened, was in employee benefit expenses.
Right, the wage bill.
The wage bill and headcount expenses dropped to $73.6 million. That's a decrease of over 8%.
An 8% cut to the non-playing staff wage bill in just one quarter. That implies a pretty ruthless approach to restructuring. The sources link it directly to headcount reduction programs implemented in the prior year.
They do. We're talking about approximately 450 redundancies across the club.
450.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, that's nearly a third of the club's entire corporate and back office workforce. This wasn't just a bit of surgical trimming. This was a wholesale clear-out designed to move from a bloated structure to a lean one and to do it quickly.
Let's just pause on that number. 450 jobs. Financially, you can see the logic, but that is a massive cultural shock for an organization. Were these just admin roles, or did it go deeper?
The majority were in corporate, commercial, and administrative roles, which, well, they were widely seen as having a lot of overlap and inefficiency that had built up over years of sort of fragmented management.
The financial logic is cold but clear, though.
It is. Shedding 450 staff removes a huge permanent cost from the books, creating that sustainably lower cost base Berrada was talking about. Every single penny saved there goes straight to the operating profit.
And it wasn't just the sheer number of job cuts. The sources highlight some specific, almost symbolic cuts, which really show the cultural shift Ratcliffe is trying to bring in. The ending of Sir Alex Ferguson's ambassadorial role, for instance.
That was a huge symbolic move. The role apparently had a big salary attached, saving the club about £2 million a year.
Now, $2 million is a drop in the ocean on this balance sheet.
It is, but removing a role like that, one linked to the club's greatest ever figure, it sends a powerful message. It says the sentimental era is over. It says every single role has to be tied to current commercial or sporting value, no matter what your history is.
And the other one that really stood out, which sounds almost petty but is strategically quite profound, was cutting the free lunches for employees.
It is profound because it's a culture marker. Free meals, big expense accounts, things like that. They're often features of businesses that have just grown a bit lax over time.
So it said the message.
An unmistakable one from the very top right down to the ground floor. The era of corporate pampering is over. Every single non-essential expense is being looked at. It's a relentless, cost-first approach to operations.
And that, predictably, created a split reaction among the fans, didn't it? On one side, you've got the pragmatists.
Yeah. They're the ones who say INEOS is taking the necessary, painful decisions to make the club healthier financially. They see the profit and the changes as proof of competent management finally dealing with years of waste. You have to break a few eggs and all that.
But then you have the critical view, which focuses entirely on the human cost. They're asking, how many longtime club employees were sacrificed for this profit headline?
And that's the essential ethical question in a sports business, isn't it? The financial report shows operational excellence. But football clubs are more than just businesses. They're community anchors. The financial discipline is undeniable, but the human cost creates this huge tension between the corporate side and the fans, who worry the soul of the club is being sold for a better balance sheet.
It's that classic dichotomy. Is it a football club or is it business? And the new management is treating it ruthlessly as a business.
Yeah.
And the profit swing proves that's working.
Absolutely. Now let's move on from the operational costs and look at the second major driver of this profit, player sales. The profit on disposal of intangible assets was absolutely essential for this quarter.
It was huge, £45 million, an increase of nearly $10 million year on year. This is where the club showed they can be smart traders.
And this figure is crucial for two reasons. First, it boosts the operating profit straight away. Second, it is vital for FFP and PSR compliance. The sources credit this positive result to selling key players and also triggering sell-on clauses for academy products like Alonga, Carreras, and Oidel.
And one of the sources explicitly mentioned the sale of Garnacho as a significant contributor. Now, that's a massive sporting decision. If true, selling a current first-team player just to hit a financial target.
It suggests the new management is completely prepared to sacrifice what we might see as sporting depth for financial health and compliance, selling a player like Garnacho for a big book profit.
Which is the sale price, minus whatever's left of his value on the books.
Exactly, his remaining amortized value. It's a really powerful lever. The new regime understands that to stay within that £105 million loss limit over 3 years, you have to be expert traders.
Okay, let's get technical for a second. Why is profit from player sales more valuable for compliance than, say, the same amount of commercial revenue?
It's all about how the rules are calculated. Commercial revenue is already eaten into by operating costs, taxes, interest payments. But profit from player sales, or profit on disposal of intangible assets, is a direct, clean income stream. It immediately offsets the amortization costs of other players and shrinks that PSR loss calculation.
So if a player is sold for $50 million and his book value is only $10 million, that £40 million profit is a huge benefit for FFP. It gives them spending room that commercial revenue just can't.
It is. The old way was just to rely on being a commercial behemoth. The new way is commercial growth plus hyper-efficient asset management. So to sum up this part, Revenue was slightly down, but they slashed operational costs and made smart player sales to get that clean £13 million operating profit.
A resounding operational success. But this is where the story pivots dramatically, isn't it? Because those profits only tell half the story.
Not even half.
We have to move now to the crushing reality of the balance sheet. Despite all that hard-won operational profit, Manchester United's total debt has risen to a record high of £1.29 billion. That figure is just stunning.
It is the single biggest financial headwind the club faces. And we absolutely must break this down for you because, as we said, not all debt is created equal. That $1.29 billion is made up of a few key parts that you need to understand to get the full picture.
Okay, let's go through them one by one, starting with the most sort of normal business debt.
Right. First up is trade debt, which is $539.7 million. This is basically money the club owes to other clubs for transfers.
So these are the installment payments on players. If they bought someone for $80 million, they might be paying $20 million a year for 4 years, that kind of thing.
Correct. And analysts generally see this as managed business debt. As long as the club has solid guaranteed revenue coming in, which United does, to cover these future payments, this is just a necessary cost of building a squad. It's standard practice.
Okay, what's next?
Next is financial debt, which stood at $749.2 million. This is the club's direct long-term borrowing. And this is where it gets a bit more complex because it includes the core debt from the 2005 takeover, but also new borrowing for other things.
And the third component, which seems to be a big reason for the overall increase, is the heavy use of the Revolving Credit Facility, or RCF.
Absolutely. The RCF, which is essentially the club's corporate overdraft, jumped significantly. It's now at $268 million, up from only about $35 million a year ago.
And they drew down a huge chunk of that this quarter.
£105 million. They drew that down specifically to fund their summer transfer spending.
Hold on. If the club's whole mantra is cost-cutting and efficiency, why are they relying so heavily on what is basically a high-interest, short-term overdraft to fund transfers? That seems to contradict the whole idea of being prudent.
That's a brilliant point of tension. The official line is that it's all about timing. Transfer payments don't always line up neatly with when revenue comes in, so the RCF acts as a sort of bridge loan.
So they borrow the cash to make a signing, then pay it back when the big sponsorship or TV money hits the account later in the year.
That's the idea. But using $105 million of it does suggest they were pretty low on cash reserves when they made those big summer signings. It still points to a cash problem, even if the underlying business is profitable.
It shows how tight their liquidity is.
It does. They are operationally profitable, yes, but the constant need to service all the existing debt means there's less cash just sitting around. And that forces them to rely on expensive short-term credit to execute their football strategy. Which brings us to the fourth and most destructive component of the debt.
The infamous Glazer takeover debt. The legacy of the 2005 leveraged buyout.
That core debt is still there, virtually unchanged. It's at £481 million. And this is the key. Think of trade debt like a mortgage you take out to buy a house. That's productive. The LBO debt is like if the previous owner bought the house with a loan and then forced you to put that loan in your name, and now you're stuck paying their interest.
And the sources confirm this debt is what single-handedly flips that brilliant £13 million operational profit into an overall net loss for the quarter.
That is the brutal truth of it. The club paid a staggering £10.9 million in interest payments alone in this one quarter.
$10.9 million.
That payment, which comes almost entirely from the LBO debt, essentially wipes out nearly 85% of their hard-won operating profit. Just gone.
And if we then factor in other financial costs.
Exactly. When you include the net finance costs of $21.4 million, which includes a big hit from foreign exchange rates because that debt is in US dollars, the $13 million profit is completely annihilated. It becomes an £8.4 million net loss. And this is the most profound lesson from this report. The Glazers LBO debt is the single biggest financial hurdle stopping the club from being properly profitable.
The opportunity cost of that $10.9 million in interest is just immense. It's money that is just vanishes. It generates zero revenue.
Zero. Think what you could do with nearly £11 million in football operations. You could hire a whole new scouting department for a year, fund a state-of-the-art data analytics division, or cover a huge chunk of a star player's signing bonus. But instead, it goes straight into the pockets of bondholders, servicing a deal that happened 20 years ago and only ever benefited the owners.
And this is what fuels the fan anger. One source described the Glazer debt as parasitic and obscene, and the comparison to good debt is so important here. Borrowing for a stadium generates future revenue. This debt just pays for the cost of the takeover itself.
The fans see it perfectly. The fact the club was debt-free before 2005 and now, nearly 2 decades on, that core debt is still there. While the club has paid well over £1 billion in interest and other costs, it just creates this fundamental crisis of trust.
And that crisis of trust now extends to the new partners, INEOS, doesn't it? The ownership conflict is heating up again, even though they're proving to be competent operators.
It creates a really tricky environment for INEOS. You've got some fans praising them for doing a great job and making the club much healthier financially, but then you have others who see INEOS and the Glazers as the hideous twins.
What's the suspicion there?
The suspicion is that INEOS are just competent enough to make the Glazers' asset, the club, more valuable, hiding the Glazers' real intention, which is to just keep extracting value before they finally sell up completely.
So, the new management has fixed the operational holes, making the club financially sound enough to pay the Glazers' debt more effectively. That's the skeptical interpretation.
Exactly. The operational efficiency is a double-edged sword. It's good for the club's stability, but it's also fantastic news for the Glazers, who now have a better run machine servicing their decades-old debt. Until that interest payment line is dealt with, the net bottom line will always be negative, and the cloud of the LBO will just hang over everything.
Right, let's pivot to the sporting side of things. The financial health directly impacts what the club can do on the pitch. We noted the men's team is currently 6th in the Premier League.
And the women's team is 3rd in the WSL, having just got their first ever Champions League qualification, which is fantastic news.
It is. But that 6th place for the men's team is critical when you look at the financial strategy. That Q1 profit was achieved without the massive boost of Champions League revenue.
And missing out on the UCL means United is basically operating with one hand tied behind its back. They're forced to rely on this aggressive cost-cutting just to stay in the black operationally before the interest payments wipe it all out.
Which brings us back to FFP and transfer strategy. That $45 million profit from player sales isn't just a nice bonus. It's a necessary part of their ability to buy new talent. This quarter, they spent nearly $100 million on new players.
And that spending capacity is directly linked to their ability to sell well. To balance a PSR sheet that only allows $105 million in losses over 3 years, a club like United has to constantly generate big profits from player sales.
To offset the amortization costs.
Exactly. Amortization is the accounting cost of a player spread over their contract. If you buy a player for $100 million on a 5-year deal, that's a £20 million accounting loss every single year.
So that $45 million profit from sales doesn't just cover the cost of the players who left. It helps offset the amortization costs of the entire current squad. It's a way of creating FFP breathing room.
Precisely. And the ability of the new management to identify, value, and sell players for a profit, even if it's a controversial sale like the reported Garnacho one, it shows they're building the discipline they need. They are strategically cycling assets to stay compliant while still investing nearly $100 million in the squad.
This financial platform then immediately sparks the fan debate about the upcoming transfer windows, doesn't it? One side argues that because they're healthier financially, the club should now go berserk in the market to guarantee a top 4 finish and get that Champions League football back.
That's the emotional urgency talking. The logic is, if we're financially healthier, why hold back? Spend the money now to get back into the UCL, because that UCL revenue is the quickest way to solve the debt interest problem. It's about immediate sporting success driving massive sustainable revenue.
But then there's the other perspective, which is just as compelling. They advocate for measured, intelligent spending, urging the club not to repeat the expensive failures of the past.
A Pogba's, a Di Maria's, yeah.
Exactly. They stress the need to focus on producing and bringing through academy talent.
And this is the speed versus sustainability debate. The sources we have mention the excitement around academy kids, like the 15-year-old JJ Gabriel. Academy graduates are financially priceless. If they play, they cost nothing on the FFP loss sheet. If you sell them, 100% of the fee is pure profit.
But you can't rely on a 15-year-old to solve your problems at striker right now.
Of course not. So the pragmatic consensus is a blend. Spend wisely on guaranteed quality where you need it most, while you nurture the academy to create that solid baseline of low-cost, high-profit assets for the future.
And that whole strategy is governed by one thing:
The Champions League imperative. That 10.9 million interest bill is the constant pressure. As one fan said in the sources, our interest on borrowing is a massive cost line item, and for it to go down, we need to be able to pay it off. Quickest way is CL money.
It's the only thing big enough.
The uplift from consistent UCL participation can be well over £100 million a year.
Yeah.
That's the only way to generate the kind of super revenue you need to even start thinking about paying down the actual LBO debt itself, not just the interest.
So the new management has proven they can stop the operational bleeding. The next and infinitely harder phase is proving they can use that platform to get back to the UCL consistently.
Because if they don't, that operational efficiency just becomes a permanent necessity. It keeps the club treading water, rather than being the springboard for investment in the squad and, crucially, in infrastructure.
Speaking of infrastructure, this whole debt conversation leads directly into the rumored multi-billion-pound stadium project. If the club is already saddled with $1.3 billion in debt, how can the owners possibly consider taking on another $2 or $3 billion for a stadium?
This is the ultimate strategic gamble. And it forces us back to that idea of good debt versus bad debt. A new modern stadium is seen as textbook good debt because it would radically increase matchday revenue, especially corporate and hospitality income. It guarantees massive new income streams for the future. It would also be a colossal physical asset on the balance sheet, which instantly makes the club more valuable.
So the owners are playing a long game. The logic is that the new debt from the stadium is okay because the new revenue it creates will far outweigh the interest costs, and it will help manage the old Glazer debt in relative terms.
Exactly. One source made the point that the value of their investments are going to skyrocket in years to come because of a new stadium and continued commercial growth. The bet is that the revenue uplift will pay for the stadium, and once that's stable, the total debt load will just be more manageable relative to the club's now even more gargantuan earnings. It's a marathon, and the question is whether the team on the pitch can win enough sprints to sustain that marathon pace.
So this deep dive into United's Q1 figures gives us a crystal clear picture of this profit paradox. We see a financial powerhouse achieving operational resilience, that £13 million profit, through effective, if difficult and controversial, cost-cutting by the new management.
But this success is just tragically overshadowed by the staggering parasitic debt, that $1.29 billion figure inherited from the leveraged buyout, which results in a net loss.
The new operational team deserves credit for stopping the internal waste. They've made the club leaner, more streamlined, and compliant with SFP.
They have, but that legacy LBO debt remains a persistent multi-generational tax on the club's potential. It is the weight they can never truly get rid of unless they achieve consistent Champions League success.
And the long view for the ownership is clear. They expect the club's value to skyrocket, driven by commercial growth and potentially a massive new stadium.
Yeah.
They're playing for exponential returns over the next decade.
But the immediate reality for the manager and the fans is that interest payment. The Q1 figures show the new regime can manage the books efficiently, but the Glazer debt is the ultimate headwind, blocking true, unrestrained reinvestment in the football side.
Which leads us with the ultimate strategic and, I think, provocative thought for you to mull over. Given that Manchester United is now demonstrably more financially stable on an operational level, what is the critical trade-off that's now required for success?
Right.
Should the club immediately use its improved financial position to take on the next massive debt, that multi-billion-pound stadium project, to guarantee the huge diversified revenue streams they need to eventually surpass their rivals?
Or, conversely, should the club focus every single bit of marginal profit and resource on aggressively shedding the existing non-revenue-generating LBO debt first, regardless of how many painful years that long deleveraging process takes? It is a choice between prioritizing strategic growth-focused debt for the future or enduring years of austerity to finally shed the parasitic debt of the past. And the answer to that really determines the club's entire trajectory for the next decade.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope this analysis has equipped you with the knowledge to look past the headlines and understand the deep, complex financial mechanics at play at Old Trafford. We'll catch you next time.